All right, we'll call our meeting to order, Juvenile Welfare Board meeting, February 8th at 11 a.m. And we'll begin with the pledge. And Mr. Bartlett, would you lead us in the pledge this morning? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good morning. Different day, different time with our business for Juvenile Welfare Board. Let's begin by calling for a motion to accept the consent items.
So move.
So moved, Mr. Ong.
Second.
Mr. McCurick. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? This motion carries. If you're following along online, we are on our agenda action item, which is number 3A, consideration of a letter of support for memorial renaming of the Pinellas County Justice Center. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Onks to take this and talk to us about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just want to thank all of you for being here and the staff. I know this is extremely unusual for us to have a meeting on a Monday. I certainly wouldn't have even proposed it if I didn't think it was exceptional circumstances related to Mr. McCabe. As you all know, I kind of off the cuff brought this up at the last meeting, which wasn't necessarily fair to you or to the staff, but I do have an update since that time. Speaker Sprouse is joining us via Zoom. And since that meeting, we were formally asked if we would be willing to support the initiative via a letter to the county, basically vouching for and explaining Bernie's service and his impact to this board. And along those lines, I also serve on the YMCA of the Suncoast Board, and our board voted unanimously to send a letter detailing Bernie's 20 years plus of service to the YMCA board. And in my mind, it's extremely important for us to be deferential to the county. We are not making this decision. The county will make the decision. There is a process, and we absolutely need to respect that and understand it. I think what we're being asked to do is vouch for Bernie's service to the JWB. And that's what I think is really my ask today. Just kind of memorialize that and to put that in writing like so many other organizations have done. Like I said, the YMCA of the Suncoast, Amplify Clearwater, the St. Pete Chamber of Commerce. I know Tanya Williams from SPC has sent a letter. Ken Burke, Chief Judge Rondolino, Mr. Dillinger has sent a letter. Ms. Malo, Mr. Bartlett, and many others regarding Bernie's different impacts, whether it's as a prosecutor, as a mentor, as an attorney, as a public servant, as a board member of the Y. And obviously, I think, again, the ask today is just to memorialize his impact on the JWB, which we all know was extremely substantial. I also wanted to mention that I too think it's extremely important that we recognize Mr. Dillinger, and I don't want what we suggest to be exclusive to Mr. McCabe. So I'm completely open to also vouching for Bob. And in the draft that I wrote, I had mentioned Mr. Dillinger as the spearhead to amend the special act to put the state attorney and the public defender on the board, and that Bernie kind of helped pick up the mantle towards the end and push it over the goal line. And that really, in my mind, their legacies are inextricably intertwined for the better for both of them and the community. And so I don't want this to be construed as anything that would be exclusive to honoring Mr. Dillinger as well. But at this point, I know Speaker Sprouse has joined us via Zoom. He is traveling back to Tallahassee. We appreciate you, Chris, for joining us. If you would like to maybe explain a little bit more about the process and the ask from the board.
Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate you all having me and being willing to take this up today. I really can't say people in this particular room, don't already know. Many of you have served on the JWB with Mr. McCabe for a long time, or you've served in various other roles, many of you multiple roles, where you've all worked together kind of for the betterment of the community. The one thing I would say, because I do think that sometimes, all of us, either growing up or working or living in Pinellas County, maybe don't think about is the statewide impact, that Mr. McCabe has had on the justice system over the last 30 plus years. I've been in the legislature just a brief time, 6 years, 8 by the time I'm finished. And in the decade, a little less than a decade that I've been here, there's probably nobody in the state of Florida who's had more significant impact on the justice system than Bernie did. And, we always think about that in the prosecutorial context when it comes to, hey, bad guys, doing bad things and going to prison. But the reality is a lot of the hard work, the really hard work, took place when Mr. McCabe was one of the first state attorneys in Florida to create a drug treatment court to help those who are addicted to drugs and try to get ahead of recidivism. He was the first state attorney in the state to create a veterans treatment court with the realization that veterans have particular challenges that our community can work to redress and get them out of the criminal justice system and back on a pathway to prosperity. Just an incredible man, as all of you know, who lived an incredible life. And this seemed like the most appropriate way to be able to honor him would be to honor the naming of a building that he walked into, every day in the pursuit of justice. And I think one thing that sets Mr. McCabe apart from a lot of folks is that when I was an assistant state attorney and the thousands of people who worked for him, the question was always the same. Anytime you brought him an issue, anytime you brought him a case, the question was, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do for this victim? What's the right thing to do by this criminal defendant? What's the right thing to do based on the facts of this case? And that's a rare thing in our world, where you have somebody who's singularly focused on trying to do the right thing. And, we're blessed that we live in Pinellas County, and that we've had leaders like Bernie, and the opportunity to honor him, I think, is one that we shouldn't pass up, particularly the fact that, he was taken from us during a time of COVID where, we couldn't pack a church full of thousands of people because it wouldn't have been the responsible thing to do. And Bernie wouldn't have wanted it that way, because he would have always said, what's the right thing? So I think this is an opportunity for us, at a date certain, if the county commission were to agree to name the building after Mr. McCabe, to get the thousands of alumni of the state attorney's office, the criminal justice system, the judiciary, law enforcement community, and community leaders from throughout the state to be at a place to honor Mr. McCabe and his legacy. And again, I know you all have inconvenienced yourself today to be there to talk about this. And I'm very appreciative. Brian, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but mostly I'm just grateful that you've given me the opportunity to say a few words about Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you joining us. And before I turn it back over to Chair Ralston, I also wanted to mention, I did reach out to some former board members. Obviously, we're not allowed to talk about it, but I wanted to reach out to the former board members to see how they felt. And Cecilia Burke, Elise Minkoff, and Judge Sullivan all responded that they would be supportive of this from their perspective as well. So I did want to inform you of that.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sprouls, for being here this morning.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate all the work that you're doing on behalf of children, and don't ever hesitate to give me a call if I can do anything for you.
Well, why don't you stay on the phone for a moment, and I'll open up
Yes,
for
ma'am.
comments, concerns, questions before we call for the vote.
Sure.
Mr. Bartlett, would you put your microphone on, please?
How's that? All righty. Just kind of put it in perspective. Bernie employed over 400 people in the Sixth Circuit, and of the 400, there were 175, or give or take, lawyers that work for him. So over the years through the office, there have been hundreds and hundreds of lawyers that have cycled through, gone out into the community, who have felt the imprint of Bernie's ideology, so to speak. And it's often said that the greatest power a person has as a prosecutor is the power not to charge people with committing crimes, but to not charge people for things that they've done. Find ways of alternative resources to move forward. And Bernie was very, very good at that. And his programs of deferred prosecution and other things that he did. But he has left in the legal community, and I know that extends far beyond what the JWB is involved with, but in the legal community itself, if you look at who has processed through the Criminal Justice Center and left a fingerprint on different people, who has had the greatest effect, and it's been Bernie. Of the 69 judges that now sit on the bench, in Pinellas and Pasco counties, more than half of those judges got their upbringing in the state attorney's office. So the way they do things, the way they think is carrying forward of Mr. McCabe and his beliefs and everything else. And as Mr. Sproul said, his kind of motto was, do the right thing. Not because it should be done, because we want it to have that outcome, but is it the right thing to do to get there? And he showed no fear at all ever about going forward under those circumstances. So he has had more of an imprint on the criminal justice system and the legal system than anybody else I can know in Pinellas County. So keep that in mind when making your decision also.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. McCurrick?
I think we've all said over the last few meetings and the like about how important Bernie was to all of us. And I really do appreciate Speaker of the House to have come and risking his life driving along the way, trying to watch us on Zoom.
He's got a driver. He's got a driver.
He's
Oh, he's got a driver. Okay, good. I feel much better.
I'm not driving. No laws are being broken.
Okay, good. But again, I think without a doubt, Bernie was an exemplary person who has done just a great deal for the children of this community, for the people of our county, and for all of us individually at some point in time. So I would like to make the motion to move forward with writing the letter to the county commission and asking to provide them with our support for this naming. Motion to move forward.
Thank you. And at that point, we'll call for a second. Second. And any other further conversation? All in favor? Oh, Karen, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to let you know I am voting no today because I feel like I'm representing the county commission in this matter, and we have not had the opportunity to discuss it at this point. So obviously I'm not allowed to abstain, but I feel like in trying to be respectful of the discussion that'll happen at the county commission meeting tomorrow, then I am voting no. Thank you.
And
Okay.
I just want to say, I am really sorry, Karen, because this is like, I can't imagine a situation where a county commissioner is on a board that's also a government board where they are being asked to vote on something that the county commission is then going to be voting on. And it's just the unique nature of the way this board is made up and thank God you are on this board, but I'm so sorry that you're in this position, because if there was any way to avoid that, I would have avoided that. So I'm sorry. And I totally understand your position on that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And one opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you again for coming in this morning on the ride to Tallahassee.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate your willingness to honor Mr. McCabe. Talk to you soon.
All right, we will move on to action item B, which is the consideration regarding a tribute video for the Honorable Bernie McCabe and a leadership award named for and in honor of Honorable Bernie McCabe and the Honorable Bob Dillinger. So for that, we're going to turn it over to April.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. As we continue to mourn the loss of longstanding board member, the Honorable Bernie McCabe, and at the request of this board, staff are proposing for your consideration 2 ways to memorialize his legacy. First, a special tribute video to shine a light on his remarkable service over the past 20 years. He was a cornerstone of our board. His litmus test was, is it good for the kids? As House Speaker said, is it the right thing to do for kids? And he challenged others to look through that same lens. The tribute video would debut at our March board meeting, and we would invite Mrs. McCabe and other family members to join us. Second, for your consideration is a leadership award in Mr. McCabe's name and in the name of the Honorable Bob Dillinger to honor these 2 amazing leaders who were always on the side of kids. As you know, Mr. McCabe and Mr. Dillinger joined the JWB board in 2000 after a legislative change to our special act added their positions as state attorney and public defender to our board. Both were formidable leaders, and while they did not always agree, they found common ground when it came to putting children first. Staff are recommending that we create the Dillinger-McCabe Putting Children First Leadership Award. The annual award would be bestowed to a well-established leader, game changer, and champion for children. An individual who embodies and embraces what these two men stood for. Leadership. Leadership in driving system change for Pinellas County children and families, specifically related to prevention. Excellence in ensuring children had equitable opportunity to fulfill their potential and achieve meaningful and purposeful lives. Advocacy and compassion for putting children first, especially those of underserved communities. Determination and dedication as a game changer in improving children's lives in Pinellas County. Now, this year is unique. It marks our 75th anniversary, and it presents a unique opportunity to launch this award at an event next fall on or around our referendum date, which is November 5th. We could combine an anniversary celebration with our annual Kids First luncheon, and we would launch the award at that time. And it's befitting of our history and our creation that these two men were fierce drivers of prevention. And they made it their life's work to keep children out of deeper end services and out of systems. We are also making a recommendation about the selection committee for this leadership award, that it be comprised of the board chair, the immediate past chair, and a former board member, along with a family member each from the McCabe and Dillinger families. So we appreciate your consideration for the tribute video and the leadership award. And if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to entertain those at this time.
So moved. No, I just wanted to say this is excellent work. For such a short period of time from the last board meeting, really great job, staff. So, and I think it's exactly what I had in mind at least. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so moved.
I'll second it. And I agree with that. Follow up with those statements as well, that this, by handing this award out as a leadership award to other leaders in our community throughout the years, it will certainly carry on their names forever. And they are unique to this board, not that every board member is not unique to this board, but those two are really unique in the way they came about being a part of this board and what they fought for to be on this board. So I think this is actually a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Mr. McCurrick?
I just want to echo those words, but also to say that I believe having the group at which you just described as being those to make the decision on who should be is the most appropriate of them all. And that gives the opportunity for not only people of our board, but past members of the board, as well as the families, to pick or choose the leader that's most appropriate. And we have other awards which we give off for a number of different reasons, which are fantastic. But this one's going to be very unique, and it's going to be a very special award to that one person, or it would be one person in the community that has exemplified what these two gentlemen have done throughout their career. So great job for the staff. Thank you so much.
All right, seeing no other lights. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries, and I too want to follow up. There was lots of phone calls, lots of meetings, lots of effort that went into this, and it came right at the heels of our annual summit. And I join the board members who spoke that it's just a great tribute to these two wonderful men, and I'm very, very grateful for the work that staff put into this.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. For those following along online, we are action item C, which is to approve $1,470,000 budget amendment to the St. Petersburg Free Clinic from unassigned fund balance to address chronic food insecurity. Beth, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I want to point out that Jennifer Yeagley, CEO of the St. Pete Free Clinic, is here if you have any questions that you would like to ask her as well. I want to make the most significant point here is that this is food for families with children across the county. So while we are using a lead agency that is the lead agency in our county most capable of purchasing, storing, and distributing food, the food is for agencies and families with children across the entire county. And as such, we picked 3 other agencies that would be would-be hubs: the Shepherd Center in Tarpon Springs, the Dream Center in Lilman, and RCS Food Bank in Clearwater. From those would be a hub and spoke approach. Each of those works with countless other agencies, and the St. Pete Free Clinic in its own right works with, I think, 50 plus agencies, more south of Ulmerton, although that may not be absolutely accurate, but mostly south of Ulmerton. What we are finding through our agencies is that the numbers of people coming to food banks and food pantries has roughly doubled since pre-COVID, and the numbers have remained high. Last summer, we were able to move some money into food in exactly this manner. During the fall, the COVID CARES, or the CARES funding that went from the county through the Pinellas Community Foundation, put out about $600,000 a month in food support in a variety of ways. That ended at the end of December, and our read from all of those agencies who distribute food is that while they're not in crisis situation yet, they don't see the numbers going down, and they will need support. So this was the most efficient way we felt we could get literally the most food to the most people for the least money. The dollar amount, we kind of came to it in 2 different ways. One was that I mentioned the $600,000 a month, which is probably literally all that system could possibly manage. So probably the number that if you were to fully fund everything across the county would probably be $500,000 a month. Of those receiving food assistance, roughly half are families with minor children, and that is our responsibility. And so if you took half of 500,000, that'd be about 250,000. We knocked it down a little bit from that for a couple different reasons. Nothing really magical about that. All of this is completely scalable. 10,000 is $10,000 more of food. $1 million is that much more in food. So there are not stages or steps in this that are especially critical. As it happens, as we looked at our incremental laps that we talked about at our December meeting, which we used 3 million of for our eviction prevention continuation of a program that was funded in the same manner as this was last fall. We have about, just almost exactly $1,470,000 left. If you were to look at that incremental lapse we experienced last year, that was clearly due to COVID. In other words, we spent that much less than we would have projected, even given our typical lapse amount And all of that was due to COVID, things that were just closed, things that were not spent. And so it seemed particularly appropriate, just as in the case of eviction prevention, that we put that money this year into those crises that families are experiencing due to COVID. I'll leave it at that. And I don't know, Jennifer, if there's anything else you want to say, or I would welcome questions to me or to Jennifer.
Commissioner Sue?
My question is, I assume that some of this is paying for administrative and overhead costs, and I'd like to know what that is. Is it just for the St. Pete Free Clinic, or is it also going to cover the other food banks as far as administrative, or is this strictly
Yeah.
food?
Actually, the good news is this is food.
This is only
Period.
food. Okay.
And so we thank our partner in the free clinic for being willing to absorb the people it takes to order the food, the gas it takes to get it where it belongs, the driver, all of those things. So because it is part of their mission as well, and they are raising money for this purpose, they were willing to take this money just for food and not ask us also for administrative costs, which is a good thing. I don't know, Jennifer, do you want to?
Jennifer, would you like to be sure to put your microphone on? Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here today, and certainly for your consideration of this funding on behalf of everyone at the Free Clinic. We were the recipient, as Beth mentioned, over the summer of funds similar to this, where we served as the hub and were able to distribute out to partners in this same model. And so really we're able to prove out our capability to do that. And certainly with receiving CARES funding in the October through December time period, really scaled up to a significant degree and did even more distribution than we ever historically had done. And so now feel very firm in the capability to continue with this model of distribution, which in any case has always been a part of our model, but certainly scaled up as a result of COVID. And cannot echo enough just the importance of the timing of these funds and the critical nature. And just to give you a little bit of a glimpse of the need we continue to see. Pre-COVID, a busy day for the Free Clinic just at our food pantry was serving about 170 households per day. Currently, the average number of households that we are serving is upwards of 350 every day, and that has not gone away. It has been very consistent. There have been days when we have served as many as 700 households. These are primarily households that are families with children. Pre-COVID, just over 20% of the families we serve were those with children, and now it is nearly 60%. So we know that families with children are making their way directly to us and to our partners. And so we, continue to use resources like this for those purposes. And again, want to thank you for the consideration, especially with the ending of the CARES funding on December 31st. And not knowing what the future holds, both with respect to need, but also with future funding. And so this is a critical level of support that we are so happy to be able to provide our community.
Thank you.
And
See-
I just would want to add a point that just like our eviction prevention funding, because we don't know what federal, state, or other funding might come down the pike. If there is other governmental funding that would fill this need, then our contract says we would step back because we would not supplant other funding. I think the odds are less that will be true here in the food arena than it probably is in the eviction prevention, with rental assistance being some part of what's being discussed in Washington.
Okay, I see Mr. McCurrick.
Yeah, I'm extremely happy to hear that your organization is willing to step up as well as we're willing to discuss doing this. What's extremely important, and I'm sure you understand this, is got to be the food and everything that we have within the distribution network has to go cross county. It is incredibly important that we reach everywhere within this county. And honestly, Free Clinic is known for all the great work that you've done and do in South County. So to hear that you're able to expand and become the hub and be able to link out across that adds a lot of value and some comfort to the fact that all the children in our communities across the county will have an opportunity and be served and helped through getting this food. So I can't stress that enough, how important that is in this whole process. And I'm really appreciative that you're willing to do that.
Let's call for a motion. Mr. McCurrick, and a
Motion
second. Mr. Ongst, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for handling those administrative costs. All right. For those joining us online, following the agenda, we're on the presentation portion of our agenda. Item A, COVID-19 impact on outcomes. Karen Bogus and Barbara Morrison Rodriguez. I'd like to, before we get started, I want to say thank you and welcome to our new, let me get this title correct, Chief Evaluation and Innovation Officer. It is. I'd like to see that business card. But again, we're grateful to have you on board, and thank you for joining us. And let's go ahead, Karen, and we'll talk about the impact of COVID.
So good morning, everyone. Karen Bogus, Performance and Evaluation Manager. And I'm going to speak specifically to our programs and how COVID-19's impact on them. And then Dr. Morrison Rodriguez will follow that presentation, speaking about some of the impact that goes beyond just our funded programs, but for other agencies providing services to our community. You can move to the next slide. We're going to have a team effort here. So what was the purpose and methodology of our COVID-19 impact survey? We wanted to assess what was the impact for our programmings and also understand how it would be impacted moving forward. We created an internal team, developed the survey. It was 23 questions. 77 of our programs responded. The survey was administered the first week of November, and the survey responses included all the impacts that happened between mid-March 2020 through the end of September 2020. And I want to thank both the internal team that developed this survey, as well as all the programs who really had well thought out responses. And the results that I'm going to go over both have both quantitative and qualitative information they provided. Overall impacts. So when we look at these bullets, I just want everyone to understand that an agency could have responded to all of these. It was whatever happened during that time period of mid-March through the end of September. So what we see here is 79% of our programs had to change their service delivery model. And when we're talking about that, we see when we get to food distribution, some of them who were food pantries really became stronger food distribution sites during this time. 57% of our programs had to stop serving participants in any capacity at least once during this time. And what we see here is we do have a number of programs that provide our participant services in school settings. And so as we know, the schools closed in spring, and that certainly had an impact on our programs. 75% had staff working remotely, and 61% of our programs experienced significant programmatic challenges due to site closures. And we wanted to find out what kind of engagement strategies did programs use during this time to engage the families and children. 81% of programs continued serving their target population through alternative, innovative, creative ways. And what we see is that a lot of virtual technology stuff happened during this time. Counseling and case management occurred in virtual manner. And we saw 40% of our programs distributed food and meals. And as we just heard, the numbers, doubling the need out there. And because we had our childhood hunger impact, collective impact, there was infrastructure in place prior to the pandemic happening that helped with the communication and response. And so we had 22 community sites in the spring. I know that increased over the summertime, but the majority of those were our JWB funded programs. And also during those distribution periods, families didn't just receive food and meals, they also received educational materials, they received information. As soon as we could pump out as much as we can to help keep families informed of anything that was going on in the community. Technology. So there was a lot of technology challenges that occurred and maybe still are occurring. 68% of our programs reported their participants were impacted by limited access to technology. And 66% of programs reported their participants were impacted by limited access to the internet. So where we see, and vice versa, if you don't have the technology and the hardware, you couldn't participate. And if you didn't have access to the internet, you couldn't participate. And shall I say stable access to the internet. So we asked our programs to provide us feedback and comments to many of the questions that we asked in the survey. And what we see here is Penella's support team, they're talking about that families not having the hardware and, up-to-date hardware to be able to carry out the services. And so working with families on that. And then when we see Master Kids, the Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation, children weren't always staying in one place during this time. And so the equipment didn't always go to the next place that they went to, or the internet access didn't always go to the next place that they went to. And this certainly had a level of impact. When we look at, when we asked them about service delivery challenges, what we saw is 66% of programs were impacted by lower ratios and operational capacity. And where we see this having the most impact is our early learning centers and our out of school time programs. So some of them had to close during this time. And some of them that remained open really served essential care worker children during the beginning of the pandemic. Then as we saw the sites opening up, the school sites over the summer and our other out of school time programs and our other early learning centers, they wanted to adhere to the CDC guidelines and really keeping the ratios small. So under 10, and in some cases that had a tremendous impact on how many kids that they could serve. And we see this moving forward even into this year, the limited capacity at some of our agencies, keeping to the smaller numbers to ensure everyone's safety. And then if you remember from the last board meeting, Lindsay Carson was here from our Early Learning Coalition talking about, and something we need to keep our eye on, is the availability of staff, the recruitment of staff, and how that's going to impact as we try to increase capacity when it's safe. Are the staff going to be able to be hired to be able to do that? So when we look at the comments in this section, shelters had to, at the beginning, temporarily not accept new intakes because of the COVID precautions, trying to keep everybody safe. And then the next response from Gulf Coast, or our Family Services Initiative navigation team, was that because of the availability of COVID dollars, they saw less families needing our Family Services Initiative funding and services, but the program was able to pivot to really help families in the community get information about COVID CARES dollars and work with the team at 211 to be able to help families gather that information that they needed and apply for COVID CARES dollars. Staffing impacts. So here we see 82% of our programs were impacted by the switch of staff working, going to remote working. 7% of our agencies were forced to lay off staff. 12% experienced staff furloughs, 21% reduced hours for staff, and 40% loss of volunteers. And you'll hear later on in the presentation about the volunteers, and some of our programs, the majority of their programs might be volunteers like seniors in service. And so, the volunteers in that program are at a higher risk due to their age. And so, all of those things needed to be considered during this time. On the other hand, we were able to see some of our programs were able to reassign staff, 27% increased hours, and 17% hired additional staff. And what we see here is a lot of our out-of-school time and early learning centers having to address all the COVID protocols that were in place, the cleaning and hygiene. In some cases, they needed additional help to make sure that those tests were done on a regular basis. Technology purchases. So 69% of our programs purchased additional technology for staff to work. And of those programs, 85% specifically purchased hardware, and 42% purchased software like Zoom, GoToMeetings, and Teams, which we've all now become very familiar with, right? So some key lessons learned. Services can happen in non-traditional, innovative ways. We see that with telehealth services and a lot more virtual type services that can occur. There are some meetings that run more efficiently virtually, and then of course others that really do work best face-to-face and in person. The need to increase volunteers to assist in times of disaster. We certainly saw the inequities regarding access to technology and hardware and access to the internet, and the need to have and for agencies to have an inventory of technology hardware to be prepared to have to go into a complete virtual environment. And then here we see some of the lasting impacts that the agency spoke to: permanent sanitation and hygiene protocols at the programs, more regular comprehensive disaster trainings, of course now to absolutely include pandemics, sustaining the expansion of telehealth services. And I just want to note here, I mean, prior to the pandemic, we always had transportation challenges in our county. And here we see and understand that in some ways, some of our programs were able to sustain consistent services with families, having the ability to meet with them remotely. So definitely that's something we'll probably see. We don't understand yet all the long-term financial impacts, but we're going to continue to watch this as we move forward. Sustaining telecommuting opportunities for staff. I think that's a discussion across the board, not just locally, but across the nation. And then data collection and quality will greatly be impacted over this next year and perhaps beyond. And when we talk about this, in some ways, our programs who do post and pre-tests when their sites were closed weren't able to do that. Certainly with our data sharing agreement with the school system, we're going to see some gaps in information on testing that wasn't able to occur last year. But the sort of good news on that is because we have a comprehensive data sharing agreement with the school system, we'll be able to look at other assessments that they are using, such as MAP testing for ELA and math, to really understand how kids were prior to the pandemic and how they're moving through and progressing, to really understand how our intervention services and other services can best support the school, how kids are going to be moving forward in school. Okay, the next 3 slides, I'm not going to read them verbatim, but I think it's important to note, we asked at the end of the survey, any other comments that you as an agency would like to make that you don't feel that we covered or that you just want to convey. And the week prior to the pandemic, our Chief Operation Officer, Judith Warren, I remember sitting in 183, gathered us together and said, we really need to group together programs and have regular communication because we had no idea what was about to happen. And that continued all through and still is happening today. And because of that communication, I think in the next 3 comments, you can move to the next one. What you see here is that agencies truly felt the support from JWB during this time. Of course, the board, you approved funding to continue during this time to help keep their doors open and keep trying to find ways to engage families. And so that collaboration, was in place before the pandemic, but certainly on a weekly basis at the beginning of the pandemic, when things were so uncertain, our agencies heard from us, if not weekly, on a daily basis. And so with that, I conclude the presentation, and I will turn it over to Dr. Morrison Rodriguez.
Thank you, Karen. I was told not to remove my mask, but I do have to be able to speak, so I'll hold it up if you don't mind. One of the things that I wanted to do, I had the privilege before coming on at JWB to serve as the evaluator for the county's large care grant initiative that was administratively supported by the Pinellas Community Foundation. Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right. So what I wanted to say is that the profile of impacts that the JWB programs had is almost an exact mirror of what we saw of programs across Pinellas County. As part of the grant application process, they were required to describe what the emerging impacts were as a justification for getting funding. So what you just saw is what happened across Pinellas County. One of the things that struck us was the significant loss of volunteers. And of course, many volunteers are retired and older people. So they were the ones who were the most reticent about coming out. So all of the profile that Karen just laid out happened across the county. I also thought you might be interested in knowing what we actually funded out of that $30 million allocation. And let me say, the challenge of getting this money out in 5 or 6 months was unbelievable in terms of a process. It certainly, if you wanted to build in some accountability mechanisms along the way. So of the $30 million that was rewarded, the Pinellas Cares nonprofit partnership, which is what the program under the Pinellas County Foundation and the county awarding to them, we gave away 18 million of that 30 million. So there was a significant amount that was left. There were 60 programs funded. Of those, 30 were given money for food, Beth. So the largest category we had for food was 58%. The needs were astonishingly high for food. The second category was behavioral health. There were 29 grantees who got 4.5 million, which represented about 25% of the pie. Eviction mitigation, there were 7 grantees because these were clearly legal service types organizations that could do that. They got 3 million and it represented 17% of the funding. So my understanding is with the funds that remained, they did not accept new applications, but existing programs could ask for additional amounts out of that original pool, but it was only to extend or expend what they had already been approved for. So that is not, they're not taking new applications for that. So I just wanted to give you that larger picture to put the JWB expenditures into context. And I'll ask if there are any questions.
I would add one more thing. It's hard to rewind to last March, but in particular, and Chief Milliken would probably resonate with this a great deal. The information from CDC, we were all watching day to day. It wasn't week or month at a time that it changed. It was changing constantly. And one of the benefits I think the JWB funded agencies got from these phone calls was that we had people here who are monitoring that closely and then sharing all of that information. So among like groups. So I think in particular for the child care groups or the early childhood groups that, that they were able to get the most up-to-date CDC recommendations and then implement them immediately. They also were able to talk about their needs, and we may forget, PPE was a big need. And so as is typical with our groups, oh, I have some extra this, okay, I can get you that. You know, we had multiple ways of getting a hold of what people needed. And we're pretty successful as a group. I mean, it wasn't just JWB, it was us, but also all of those guys helping each other. And in almost every one of those calls, there was something that one group was doing that somebody else learned from it. Then the JWB staff on the call could share with the next group that might be slightly different. So that community of learning really became an amazing resource. And we got there was some of that feedback in your comments. And really, I want to repeat, Judith really gets the credit for just making that happen immediately. So,
and I think a good example of that was that some of our early learning centers were really, and their staff were really scared about reopening, concerned about their safety and bringing anything home to, their families. And Dr. Cho, we were able to get Dr. Cho to, go and speak with them on a Zoom. And we also had licensing staff go out to make sure their protocols were set up. And I think because exactly what you're saying, because those calls were in place, that was able to happen rather quickly.
Well, good. On behalf of the board, I want to thank you once again, the Juvenile Welfare Board staff, with lots going on. Up front, everybody knows, but there's a lot of work that goes on day in and day out, regardless of the big things that we have. So I want to appreciate you and thank you for the report and the update today. And so we'll move on to presentation B, the 7th Annual Children's Summit. I hope you all participated last week, and our annual port video. So Linda Leedy, you're going to bring us up to date on how many people finally do we know we're on Zoom?
Yes, our 7th Annual Children's Summit was hosted again by St. Pete College, only not at the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions in Seminole, but by Collab Labs, because as we all know, it was virtual. And we had nearly 500 attendees a week ago Friday. The theme this year was a year of resiliency, which is, you just heard from Karen. Our funded agencies exhibited lots of resiliency in these difficult times in 2020. Mrs. Ralston started us off by introducing all of the board members and then asking for a moment of silence to honor the Honorable Bernie McCabe. And then she turned it over to Beth, who talked about our success in developing a strategic plan in this virtual environment and the addition of one new strategic result area, early childhood development. And given that is our new emphasis, we did invite our keynote speaker, who is a national expert on that topic, Dr. Dipesh Navsaria. He is an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Wisconsin. So he's a pediatrician, he is a children's librarian, he's a public health professional, and he's a child advocate, and he does speak nationally on this topic. And he educated the audience to some of the things our board has already heard about related to brain development and how important the first 3 years really are critical to a child's health and well-being throughout their life. And he also emphasized the importance of the parent or caregiver reading from the earliest days, spending time reading to their children. My favorite quote from the presentation was, "There's no app for the lap." He really, really advocates for his patients that he sees in his office, spend quality time reading to your children, which of course ties into the work that JWB does with our literacy campaign and also our coming work with early childhood development. After a few questions with Dr. Navsaria, Beth introduced our annual report video, and then Mr. McCabe closed out the program. From the feedback we received, it was a success. We were quite nervous moving into the virtual environment. And when we heard we had 500 people, you just wonder if the technology is going to work. So we were thrilled that pretty much went off without a hitch, and everybody really enjoyed the comments and the presentation by Dr. Nafsaria. And, I don't know if we'll do it again like this in the future, but at least we managed to do it once. So thank you everybody for your support. And at this point in time, we would like to play our annual report video, which again is based on the theme of resiliency that you've seen and heard about from our funded agencies, as well as JWB staff, and really the community as a whole. Because as we know, 2020 was quite the difficult year. So go ahead, Shannon.
Last October, I arrived at the Juvenile Welfare Board full of hope. I've always been passionate about children, and JWB has been shaping the future of our county's youngest citizens for 75 years. In my first few months as JWB CEO, my team and I got right to work. We hosted our annual Children's Summit to bring child well-being data to life and shared research and best practices with our board. But nothing could have predicted or prepared us for a global pandemic. Right away, we had to reframe and rethink how our staff and funded agencies would work. So much was at stake for our county's children. We were able to respond swiftly and pivot to proactively get ahead of things. This would not have been possible without our strong foundation, smart staff, and solid relationships that were already in place.
On March 3rd, we launched a coordinated COVID response plan with dozens of calls, both to the community and with our providers. These eventually morphed to virtual meetings, which informed our providers and staff and also served to problem solve. We released dollars to stabilize programs and the workforce.
That first week, we trained all JWB staff on technology. This allowed us to work remotely from home with all of the capabilities from the office. We also updated all of the IT equipment where needed to assist staff.
We wrote and implemented a temporary telecommuting policy. And by the time the safe-at-home orders were issued, staff were successfully working remotely.
We also adopted new policies aligned with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and onboarded staff remotely.
I was one of the first. I started as JWB's new CFO on April 13th. I applied for federal relief funds and processing dozens of budget amendments.
Yes, we reviewed and approved approximately 75 budget amendments for PPE and other COVID-related needs.
We also had to review our accounting processes. We had to pay invoices and perform payroll remotely. In spite of this year's challenges, we received a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting.
It was our first year applying, so we can all be proud because it really speaks to JWB's fiscal responsibility with our taxpayers' dollars.
We were dealing with contingency funds that were promptly approved by our budget so that we could fill in the gaps in our community relative to food relief, family safety, and more. So all of this kept our contract folks pretty busy.
Yes, it did. We had procurements to meet COVID-related needs, in addition to other planned procurements like our non-operating and capital projects. Of course, we also prepared JWB's annual budget that was approved by the board in the fall.
Something as simple as signing a contract proved tough to do virtually. Implementing DocuSign for electronic signatures really was a game changer.
Totally agree, Pete. DocuSign really made things easier for us in the contracts unit. But the real work happened with our provider staff, safely delivering services following CDC guidelines. And only after that was in place did my unit determine how to safely monitor those programs out in the field.
Yes,
4 of our neighborhood family centers achieved licensure last year in spite of the pandemic.
We also addressed challenges with data collection and staff retention. In particular, with our early learning centers and our out-of-school time, we showed our appreciation for that staff with car parades and face masks proclaiming, "I'm essential for kids." All this while many of us were homeschooling our children.
Oh, yes. And so many parents like us were stressed. That's why we hosted our very first Facebook Live event with child psychologists who offered self-care tips and ways to soothe children during COVID.
What I loved is how we leveraged our collective partnerships to fill gaps, especially around food. We also expanded our Harvard-based training for children's literacy, and we created music videos in the summer to promote summer reading.
Imagine, my team has to learn to do community work on a computer screen. We held virtual conversations with our community councils, back-to-school events, and engaged our faith-based partners in making masks and handing out PPE.
We also leveraged our Family Services Initiative to help parents with back rent and utilities. When federal funds arrived, our navigators helped families access those funds. And we took our Friday morning meetings virtual, all 70+ partners.
Our board meetings moved from in-person to virtual, which took a huge amount of effort. And then, still in the midst of the pandemic, our public meetings had to become public again, requiring even more effort to keep everyone safe.
That's right, Beth. We retrofitted our conference rooms for safety, and we now have the ability to broadcast to other conference rooms and out to the internet. We also hung signs, installed hand sanitizer stations, and increased disinfectant protocols in our building.
What we did well was amass reliable and timely information to guide decisions. Press briefings, executive orders, federal legislation, government meetings, these were all being tracked on a daily basis, and the information changed hourly.
And we held town meetings like this one to connect and communicate with our staff. And here come our staff now.
Last year, our funded program served more than 60,000 children and families. Plus, thousands more benefited from collective work to address childhood hunger, grade-level reading, and preventable child deaths. We did this by investing $79.7 million to strengthen children's lives and improve their futures. With the arrival of COVID in March, JWB responded to meet immediate needs, starting with our funded agencies.
JWB instantly recognized that in the blink of an eye, the needs of our children, families, staff, and community had changed. And they were very responsive about pulling out the resources that they had available, and we accessed every one of them. They gave us information, resources, support, but most of all, they gave us peace of mind.
The pandemic triggered an unprecedented need for food. JWB responded by investing $1.2 million to nourish children and collectively provided $1.5 million free meals to kids at break spot sites when schools closed in March due to COVID.
Because of the relationships built through the Childhood Hunger Initiative, our members were able to react quickly to ensure that no child ever goes hungry. We learned that half of those receiving assistance had never before visited food pantries. The Juvenile Welfare Board responded in a big way. They not only provided relief funding to help restock the shelves of our food pantries, but it helped replenish the shelves of food pantries throughout Pinellas County.
With the rise of domestic violence, JWB remodeled property so survivors and their children were safe. We also paid rent and utility bills through our Family Services Initiative, and when federal aid arrived, We help families access those funds to prevent evictions. Our new children's literacy program served more than 13,000 children and parents last year, helping mitigate COVID-related learning loss.
In the words of Frederick Douglass, once you can read, you will be forever free. When COVID hit, we had an opportunity to partner with organizations like Read Strong and new programs like Antonio Brown and his community barbershop book club. We know that we are stronger together. And I really want to thank the folks at JWB for helping us restore that legacy of literacy for our scholars going forward into the future.
With partnerships already in place, we were better equipped to address the increase in mental health needs during COVID.
JWB's Children's Mental Health Initiative, or CMHI, has been an invaluable partner to all the pediatric providers and community health centers of Pinellas and to our community. They have helped us reframe challenges to opportunities prior to and during the pandemic. Our CMHI team found opportunity with this challenge. They use our telehealth platform to provide counseling and to continue our weekly meetings with our community partners.
Together with our partners, JWB led a wellness work group aimed at addressing unique needs of families in our community.
If you think back to April in 2020, I'm sure you remember it being a stressful time. And now imagine another layer on top of that, a cultural and language barrier. Together with the Juvenile Welfare Board and Pinellas County, we formed the task force Abrazo a la Distancia, which means a virtual hug. We were able to retrain our families on online education platforms, start providing fresh food through a drive-through format. We even held a virtual party with the students where they created their own masks.
Childcare is the common denominator that allows so many other businesses to thrive. Their work makes the work of other essential workers possible.
The state of childcare in our county was fragile before the pandemic. Low wages, staff retention, shortage of qualified staff were challenges we consistently faced. But COVID has pretty much devastated the childcare industry. Right away, we reached out to the Juvenile Welfare Board to support our providers. From appreciation videos to PPE to drive-through parades, even masks that say, "I am essential for kids."
Last year, JWB recommitted ourselves to the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
If the CEO does not own it, it doesn't work. And Beth is owning it. This is her initiative and bringing in her team to be able to do that. So the recommitment, the refocus, the belief system that this does drive business results, and most importantly, it reconnects you that much stronger to the community that you're serving.
Thanks to Beth's leadership and that of her team, our board received monthly presentations highlighting our past performance in our key focus areas. We also heard comprehensive presentations from content experts about unmet needs of children. Despite the challenges and the constraints of the pandemic, our board was relentless in its commitment to approve and adopt a new strategic plan by the end of the year.
It's been a year of reframing, a refocusing, and you'll see that in our strategic plan, and specifically in our areas of early learning from 0 to 3. This new strategic direction is extremely important, helping our children to grow and learn throughout their lives. What's really important is that this is clearly a greater return on investment for us as a community.
As our year came to a close, we bid farewell to one of our board members, retiring public defender Bob Dillinger. Then we mourned the untimely loss of another, State Attorney Bernie McCabe. Both will be remembered for their 20 years of dedicated service to our board and for their passion to always do what's right for kids. It was a year of resiliency, of reframing by turning crisis to opportunity, responding to meet immediate needs and fill gaps, rethinking our usual ways of doing business, recommitting ourselves to the principles that guide our work and mission, and responsibly investing so that all children in Pinellas County have equitable opportunity to fulfill their potential and achieve meaningful and purposeful lives. It was truly a year of resiliency, a year of restoring hope.
It was outstanding, and I thought the summit was terrific. I thought the speaker that we brought in just hit all of the topics we were hoping as we debut this new strategic focus area. And the feedback has just been wonderful. And from the staff perspective, a lot of conversation took place that we lost some of the quality on this video. Doing it virtually. And it's interesting because I sat here this morning watching the video here, and we knew the quality would return in this room. And I just can't thank the staff enough. And Gail, I'm sure if Gail is watching online, the person that puts all of our videos together, she works tirelessly with all the people that she interviews and then puts together a video like this. So I don't know, I'd like to say I speak for all of the board in recognizing the work, Herculean efforts that went into the summit, to the videos, and to the work that happens every single day. So with that, Beth Houghton, our CEO report, please.
All right. Well, I want to welcome again Barbara Morrison Rodriguez to our inside gang. Barbara is no stranger to us. She has consulted with the JWB for years, but she is now part of our executive team and is making her voice and her amazing knowledge known already as she begins to find her place here. Usually you'd say, okay, I've found where the restrooms are. Well, that's not the case when you're working virtually. So I don't know what that means. I'm getting used to the technology probably is the equivalent. Wanted to mention a number of things. First, so that I don't forget, I wanted to do a quick update on the funding that this board approved for eviction prevention. You had wanted a frequent update, which is very appropriate. JWB funding went from December 31st through February 6th and may well pick up again. But as Barbara mentioned earlier, the county has now signed contracts with Pinellas Community Foundation, and then they have with their subcontractors for money that lapsed under that county, under those county contracts, that they could in fact be spent for that purpose. So as we said, when we proposed this, we would, we would step back when the CARES money was available or other funds were available. So that occurred as of February 7th. And the best guess is it'll go through about mid-April, but we will all see. We were really glad to see that happen. So about $200,000 was spent from JWB funding pool from December 31st through the end of January. 63 families received direct rental assistance payment to their landlords through the three different legal aid agencies. So that process was working well, is working well, and we're really glad that we are able to, not disrupt it too much by who the payer is, but keep the assistance out there for the families with children. And that we expect to pick back up in our funding to pick back up in mid-April. Wanted to make a point that we're seeing a lot of literacy efforts at the state level. Speaker Sprouse and Chris Latvala, both locally, are making real efforts for both a digital platform and a physical book delivery, which may sound familiar. They're using a different digital platform, but it is not too different than the Mayan platform that JWB has funded for a number of years that provides books virtually to kids in our county. And Dr. Grego was one of those in the press conference that was held who spoke to the benefit of having that kind of thing statewide. So I think we can be proud of the model that we've had locally, and we'll of course see what happens statewide, but there is a lot of emphasis on literacy. Wanted to just mention a number of the current major internal efforts. There is a lot going on at JWB. A lot of these are not headliners, but they take a significant amount of our staff effort and good work. We're in the home stretch of implementing both a new accounting and general ledger system. It felt like that home stretch would never come. It was just, for a variety of reasons, it was a lot harder to get to this point than it should have been. We're also fairly, we are in the last piece of implementing a contract and financial monitoring system. You may have heard us talk through the years about the GEMS system. The GEMS system did both the financial monitoring and the data monitoring. When we went out to look to replace it, we needed to look at two different systems. So this is the first of those, the contract and financial monitoring piece. So we're in the process then of procuring or going through the selection process for the data management system. So we've got 3 implementations going on, and or 2 implementations and 1 to come, and several large procurements going on at the same time. Also being procured, and the finance committee will serve as the auditor selection committee, will be the procurement of new auditors for us. We also are going through our accreditation process, COA. So we are preparing for that. They are not on site. We are preparing for that, and mostly looking at their current standards, because as all accreditation agencies do, they have to update their standards periodically both to assure good practice, and secondly, I think just to show they're worth you paying a fee to. And so we are updating those processes internally and those policies, but are in very good shape to meet our accreditation, which is COA. We will shortly be kicking off our diversity employee committee. They will come up with what name they want, so I won't name it a particular thing, but that group will be looking primarily at diversity and equity within JWB more than with external eyes, but first we'll be looking internally. We have a diversity training process kicking off very soon. We have had an implicit bias course, but we're really going through the other elements to enhance our ability to meet our community where they are. For many businesses or organizations, committing to a DEI process is either good business practice or the right thing to do. For us, it is good business practice. It is the right thing to do. And because at least 50% of the families and children we serve are children of color or different ethnicity, it is really core to us doing what we do well. So it's important that our own staff have the greatest possible understanding of that, and also serve as a model for the agencies that we fund, that they do as well. We are planning an adverse childhood events training soon, sometimes called ACEs, for all of our staff. That has been done before, but a lot of our staff have turned over, and it's time to do that again. We have several open positions, 2 evaluators and at least one fiscal program reviewer. And so all of our staff are staying very busy, keeping up with the volume of work that we do. You heard in the video a little bit, just all of the work that has gone on this year to pivot and change and do things differently. At the JWB, all of that means new contracts or contract amendments and budget amendments. And so a lot of that is going on. In addition, contract amendments had to be done for each of the capital allocation amounts that this board approved at its last meeting in January. So the capital RFA that we do, then there have to be contracts with each of those entities. They're fairly simple, but it all adds up. Barbara is reviewing our evaluation processes and our metrics for potential both streamlining and improvements. And we have this great opportunity of her being on board. And so there is an opportunity to improve those. Judith and the contract management group are assessing a movement to a more risk-based monitoring effort. You know, the question is, are we spending the same amount of time with every agency, or should we be spending more time with those agencies that either inherently or by their processes and our experience with them, we know are of lower risk? Do we really need to be doing as much? And Deb Pruitt and I will be teeing up some public policy, what we're calling a public policy legislative platform, not so much specific items that may or may not be in front of either federal or state government, but rather a platform of things, of items that the JWB supports on what I've called sort of an evergreen basis. An example of that might be SNAP or food stamps. For our children and families, that's always important, but what the opportunity or the risk is legislatively at any given point in time can be really different. It can be appropriation at the federal level, it can be limitations or more barriers at the state level. That all changes, but we think that we have an opportunity to be advocates within the parameters of what the board approves and the board is completely comfortable with. So that's something I expect you'll see in one of the next 2 board meetings. I'll leave it there.
Questions? All right, well, thank you. Before we move on to the beginning of the close of today's meeting, I just want to remind the board members that the information items are there for you to review every month, and particularly pay attention the legislative report. I spoke with Deb Pruitt, and she'll be giving us a more up-to-date as the session gets started. But do take a moment to read those, and if you have any questions, always check in with Beth. Ms. Flynn, do we have any requests for speakers?
We do. We have one card today from the Pinellas Regional JDC, Major Reginald Allen. Sorry.
Okay, would you like to go to the microphone?
Good morning or good afternoon.
My name is Reginald T. Allen. I'm the superintendent of Pinellas Regional Juvenile Detention Center, which is located on 140th Avenue North, just around the corner from you. I was appointed superintendent in July of 2019. When I got to the center, it was one of the better centers that I think is in the juvenile detention center within the state. But I came here with the goal of giving the community a detention center it could be proud of. I run a transparent program. I've created a bunch of partnerships with some of the folks in the community. The community has been very welcoming to me. I started a couple of programs I'm very proud of. One is called Level 3 Dinner, which takes place on Thursdays. And basically, I've gone out into the community and I've gotten them to sponsor meals for youth that are behaving very well and attempting to be better citizens. What else? One of the other things that I'm very proud of is that I've been able to rehab all 5 housing units in the center. They've been painted, the floors have been redone, the cells have been redone. I mean, there's still a lot more work to do, but being a parent of teenagers myself, I take the responsibility very serious as far as if my kids ended up in a situation where they were going to a detention center, would I be comfortable with them in this living situation? And I must say, I am very comfortable with that. I've also brought some new programming to the detention center. The state has partnered up with Kula for Karma, which is an international organization. They bring in yoga twice a week to help the kids meditate and to think about decisions that they're gonna make before they make them. Let's see, what else? We have the art program, we have faith-based volunteers, we have a drum program. And basically, I just came here today because, well, with COVID going on, I haven't met everybody that I think I need to meet, and they haven't met me or know what my vision is for your detention center. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to let me come and speak. I have a stack of business cards in my pocket here. I'll leave here. And I invite all of you to come to your detention center and see the progress we're making. And if you want to help me make it better, I welcome that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very, very much. And thank you for coming today to introduce yourself to us. And do leave those business cards. All right, before we adjourn today's meeting, we have another speaker, Ms. Flynn? Okay, before we adjourn, I'll look to Mr. Butler to announce some anniversaries for January.
Be more than happy to. I'm going to start off this afternoon with Yardis Garcia, 14 years. Karen Woods, 10 years. Diana Caro, 9 years. Joanne Chamo, 9 years. Linda Leedy, 6 years. Melissa Battle, 5 years. And Brexton Everett, 2 years. And that concludes our
Very good.
anniversaries for today.
We've got some tenure here, I might add. Okay, in finding no other business, I see no lights. We'll call for an adjournment of today's meeting. Have a great day, everybody. And thanks for the change in the schedule today.